in their musical offering. It takes the nation, millions to hold us back. Public Enemy wrote, the minute they see me, fear me. I'm the epitome of a public enemy. Used, abused, without clues. I refuse to blow a fuse. They even had it on the news. Don't believe the hype. Artists like Public Enemy are the gatekeepers of truth, civilization's radical voice. But they've also demonstrated the courage to rise above the hype of celebrity. I'm proud to be a mentor, to call them my friends. I'm deeply honored to induct these radical, revolutionary, and fearless artists into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Public Enemy.
We were fortunate to come at another time. I was born in 1960. So when I was born, I had Negro on my birth certificate. And civil rights was 1965. I was 5 years old. Malcolm X was killed in 1965. I remember that. Dr. Martin Luther King was killed in 1968. I was 8 years old. Vietnam War was from 1963 all the way to 1971. I remember that very clearly. I wrote Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos after my uncle actually had an officer come to the house, hand him a letter and say he had to be drafted into the Vietnam War. He opened the letter and just dropped it on the table, and it just graduated high school. So these are things that's already inside me. As well as the music, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud by James Brown, that said that we black, we not colored, we not Negro, we black. We speak to the world because it's how we look. Curtis Mayfield, always spoke inspiration. These are already music in the house. So it's already inside me. So when rap music came out later on, you speak a lot of words. You speak where you come from and what you know. So, if you're gonna say a lot, say what you know. So that's how that whole, people are like, well, you're political, but no, this is where I come from because this is what's inside me. When rap records came out, it just like kind of clicked to me. I was like, wow, rap records, that means covers, that means graphics. I could kind of like use my graphics to work in the art department at a record company if records get bigger. And so that actually made me get back in school and finish out school because I wanted to actually be in the art department of a record company, making record covers and stuff like that. And that pushed me through school. And I love the fact that you can apply your art to music. Now, I wasn't a big graffiti fan. I would be in the city riding the train to work, and I would look at half of the graffiti and say, no, that shit is whack. And that's what really bit me. To make a long story short, the technical aspect of what DJs were bringing to the music, that's really what started hip hop. The curiosity of taking something that was given to you as a recording and flipping it for the listener or for the audience, whether it be at a party, whether it be on a tape. I mean, cassette tapes were just new they were developed in '64, but when they hit the hood, with low expensive players, where people were able to listen to the radio station and make pause tapes. That's the beginning of hip hop, and that's why there's no secret that the Holy Trinity founders of hip hop are Kool Herc, Africa Bambaataa, the Master of Records, and Grandmaster Flash.
Chuck D, the rap renegade whose powerhouse baritone has guided Public Enemy for over 3 decades, has passionately worked to bring conscious hip-hop to the mainstream. The group's debut album, 1987's Yo, Bum Rush the Show, immediately cemented them as icons who always managed to have their sights set on the cultural zeitgeist, regardless of how turbulent it becomes. Chuck D describes Public Enemy's first album: "We happened to come with an album right out of the box. That was kind of unprecedented. And it was with a major system for a label that was experimental called Def Jam. Def Jam in the beginning was an experiment. It was not a given, so they wanted to sell albums. We came out like a rock act that had albums before we had a hot single on the streets. Public Enemy #1 was our first single, but that came out at the same time the album came out."
You know, you take the bus to Jamaica, you take the E and F train, you're in the city. So the thing about Long Island is that everybody from the city had moved to Long Island. So Nassau County was the only place, and Suffolk County was the only place where you had everybody from every area of New York City. Before that, people in Brooklyn had no reason to go to the Bronx.
We wanted to be able to take and make the new arrangement to the sounds. Because we had a knowledge of records, and we had a respect for the records, and we had a respect for the different genres, our thing was trying to make it all work. And then we didn't like where R&B was in the middle of the 80s. We just thought that the worst thing that ever happened to R&B is that they started to use synthesizers, synthesizers started to use the musician as opposed to Stevie Wonder would pimp the hell out of a synthesizer. But a synthesizer started to use, and drum machines started to use the producer. So you would just have this corny ass, just like corny ass sounds coming out of the 80s that we wanted to rebel against. So our whole goal was like, we're going to destroy the music business concept of music with music.
Set off some kind of zone inside the average B-boy that they just could not dispute, and that was Public Enemy #1, which was a tape that I made for WBAU in '84 that automatically set fire, which made Rick Rubin want to sign me in the first place. And our thing was not make music, we're gonna make unmusic, because we knew it was the hot rap records. We knew Run DMC, the Kings, coming off the Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5, so we knew all the records that were out at the time. So in order for me to make something, I wanted to make something that actually stood out. When I made Public Enemy #1 at the end of 1984 as a WBAU promo tape, I lived in Roosevelt, still to this day, next to a busy street. So we would try to we would monitor the radio show based on how many people wanted to make tapes from the radio show. So, when a car goes by, you can usually hear a car go boom, boom, boom. It could be anything. But I started to use noise, because I wanted to be able to take a real good survey. So when I noticed when I did Public Enemy #1, when a car went by and we knew that it was hot, that we were doing on the radio, a car would go by with the beat.
We're going to make some noise by bringing the noise, and we're going to make different records, and we're going to make some abrasive records. And the whole goal was then is like, make some music that your girlfriend's going to hate.
The Black Power influence became fully realized on Public Enemy's second album, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, released in 1988, with pro-Nation of Islam lyrics like, "The follower of Farrakhan, don't tell me that you understand until you hear the man." The album stirred controversy throughout the United States.
Takes a Nation of Millions sonically comes off the heels of us doing Rebel Without a Pause at 102 beats per minute, somewhere in that range. And beats per minute meant a lot to us because of DJs. So we always went on BPMs, and Keith and Hank had digital Panasonic turntables. So beats per minute always meant something to us. Bring the Noise was 109 beats per minute at the end of 1987.
for Less Than Zero soundtrack. That was like going into light speed. And so the challenge was to be able to perform it and get on it. And now we had faster songs like It's Like That, 125 beats per minute, but it was a different double speed, so to speak. But 109 was like rap on it, take the fast speed, ride it like a saddle, and get this crowd throttled up right in the middle of the days of crack. 112, 110, 113 beats per minute was the songs on It Takes a Nation. And so that's sonically, and what it said is basically said all the things that we grew up with in the 60s and 70s. You know, taking voices, there's many voices on there from the 60s and the 70s that were forgotten in the 80s. I remember Hank and I were hanging a flyer on a pole in the 80s, 1985, and we used Malcolm X looking out the wall, outside the window with his carbine rifle defending his house, which is a famous shot that was used later on by KRS-One on My Philosophy. And people, this guy came by and said, "Who's this Malcolm the 10th?" Which made me and Hank say, shit, man, we need to let these people in the 80s know in the middle of Reagan and Bush where we come from, because that was just forgotten, and that was only 10 to 15 years prior. Look, call a group Public Enemy. Man, and then we start putting appendages of what it means. Public Enemy says the Constitution of the United States said black people was 3/5 of a human being. Right. And the public looks at it as being the sacred document.
Chuck goes on to say, then we must be the enemy. What was the gist behind do the right thing, fight the power?
It doesn't happen without Spike Lee. It's, you know, just to make a long story short, and a short one shorter, Spike Lee was the portal that we never had. I mean, our first record that made a movie was actually The Tougher Than Leather by Run DMC. And I remember just bugging out, hearing like it was Terminator X to the Edge of Panic was in there during a scene where DMC has the headphones on. I'm like, wow. And we kind of like said, you know what? Radio is never gonna play us. What other portals can we actually get our music into? Which holds true for us to this day, that yeah, we love radio, we're from radio, and matter of fact, we're competitive against what we call stupid radio. We want to destroy it. In 89, Spike says, I got a movie. He came to us in 88, said, I need an anthem. The thing that made Fight the Power work and Do the Right Thing was not that it was in Do the Right Thing. Spike had it played a trillion times. I'm like, who does that? Meaning that, yeah, we had a core following that expected like hard, unlistenable music we were cool with. In fact, the Power was a little bit mainstream. It was funky, it was danceable, it was nice. Wasn't one of our records.
So there you have it. In his own words, Chuck D is Public Enemy in Cultural Sonic Ambassadors.
Mr. Belafonte has said that activists are the gatekeepers of truth and civilization's radical voice. We are coined our own term for what we do in this same spirit, raptivism. This award is just not ours. We come from DJ culture, everybody. You know, a culture that values bringing the noise, from diverse messages from a Minister Louis Farrakhan to Anthrax. For those that say that they see hip-hop take its rightful place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and some people out there thinking even at this moment, well, there goes the musical neighborhood. Let us not forget, we all come from the damn blues. All right?
I first got involved in hip hop by doing graphic design. doing flyers. That was my major in college, and I was always this artistic phenom. So the left side of my brain was always kicking. And I would do hip hop flyers on Long Island and Queens, and all of a sudden I got involved in being involved with a mobile DJ unit called Spectrum, Hank Shockley, in 1979. And coincidentally, the first hip hop records came out in July 1979 and October 1979. I was already a sophomore in college. So the bug had hit me, because I thought it was inconceivable that there could be such thing as a hip hop record or a rap record, because it was a party thing about 3 hours long. So when the first hip hop record came out, or I should say that when the second one came out in October, Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, it was 15 minutes long. But the ironic fact was how short the record was, as opposed to how lengthy it was.
All could get a passport just to get one, symbolically, because I think that's an easy route to do. Now, somebody said getting the passport, suppose you can't get out of your town. Just symbolically spend the $60 or the $70, get a passport, and then you start to see some of the hypocrisy in the United States of America trying to not let us be free people to the world.
First met Chuck D and Hank Shockley and Keith Shockley. I was with my boy Son of Berserk. And Son of Berserk was part of a group called the Townhouse 3, which was a rap group under the wing of Chuck and Hank and Keith. And one day, Son of Berserk wanted me to play some keyboards on his track that they were making for the radio show. Next thing you know, Chuck and Hank and Keith, they kind of fell in love with the guy. So I started hanging out with them. And I became part of their group, Spectrum City. And we had a friend named Bill Stephanie, who was going to Adelphi University. And Bill Stephanie had a radio show on WBAU 90.3 FM at Adelphi. And he happened to get Chuck, Keith, and Hank on the radio for the Spectrum City Mix Hour and 1/2. So as we were doing this radio show, and they was like, yo, Flay, we need to get you a radio show. We need to put you on the radio.
In the late 80s, Public Enemy released two of the most important hip-hop albums of all time, bringing the noise and a message back to the music that reverberates to this day. Originating from Long Island, New York, Public Enemy never quietly maneuvered their way to the top. They exploded fast and furiously. Formed in 1985 by university students Carlton Ridenauer, alias Chuck D, and William Drayton, alias Flavor Flav. The two wanted to make music that wasn't just socially conscious, but musically explosive. After being heard by Rick Rubin, the band's early demos began to be circulated among producers, eventually landing the group a support spot on the Beastie Boys' License to Ill tour in 1986. This was even before the newly named Public Enemy had released their debut album.
Yeah, it was no rules, no knowns, but it also pushed us. And for me, like I said, once you understand that everything comes from the turntable, now everything else becomes, easy, because it's not about, trying to figure out how to take technology to work. It's about now, how do I make the records that are from these records work in a certain arrangement? And so then you just use whatever, because before there was any samplers, because people don't realize that the sampling at the time wasn't, when I first did the first record, it wasn't available. So we had to kind of like invent that. And so then how do you invent those things?
So that was the, and it's funny because it just so happened that Chuck and Flav's voice, Flavor has this kind of like, Chuck's voice was baritone. Flav's voice is close to being a tenor. He's in that, he's in that high frequency zone. But those vocals really complement each other. You know, whereas you knew Flav and you knew Chuck, and they were distinct and they were different parts. So that also adds another element, because I think that, you know, when we produce records, especially a lot of producers, I see a lot of producers spend 1 billion years on instrumentation. And I think that instrumentation is part of it, but to me, the most important part of any song is the vocal. And I think that if I want to produce vocals like you produce music in that fashion. And it's funny because his approach to the language is not like the typical, you know, American rappers would pretty much approach it. I mean, he approaches it from a very literary sense. So thus, his words reverberated outside of the rap community. And that's why I think that, you know, Chuck was pretty much heralded as one of the best rappers. His vocabulary was a lot bigger.
I never considered myself a talent. I always considered myself somebody who was like Pete Rose in baseball. I have to run and hustle and dive to first base. There's guys like Big Daddy Kane, hands up and hands down, the most talented rapper I've ever seen. Somebody who could come off the top of their head. I never had those talents. The only talent I think that was really God-given was my voice. And back in the early days of rhyming in hip-hop, you had to have a strong voice because most of the systems were cheap. So if you didn't have a voice that can cut, people would say, get off the mic, and I never got thrown off the mic. I'm like the Satchel Paige of rap music and hip-hop. Our sole intent was to destroy music. And sonically, we set out to do that, to redefine what people thought of as music. I said, at least in the black urban sense and rap. And also to be able to say something. Rap was basically about, to us, is saying what you know and saying what you believe. And just filling the rap up with words. And being at my first records, I'm 26, 27 years old, I'm not going to try to sound like a 13-year-old kid. And I'm not going to try to appeal to them either. Because to me, rap was a grown person's sport as a hit myself. So obviously, being a child of the 60s, I'm going to, you know, say what I know, or say what had impact and influence on me.
He says, yo, man, what's up with your boy Chuck D, man? I want to battle him. I said, well, yo, Chuck D, man, we don't be battling. His name was Chucky D at the time, not Chuck D, but Chucky D. Like, yo, Chucky D, man, we don't battle. If anything, we'll let you battle somebody. We'll put on the gig and everything, put you out there, the whole nine, the whole shit. So when I got to the studio, finally got to the studio, I hear something going. That Chuck D had a cassette tape. The tape coming out of the cassette deck, going around a microphone stand, and right back into the cassette deck. That was the first loop, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. So I told my partner Chuck D, I said, yo, man, this guy Ron D. Whaley, man, yo, he wants to battle you, man. You know what I'm saying, the whole nine. And he said that that you swear you nice, Chuck. But I said, yo, Chuck, yo, G, you know what I'm saying? I told Ron D, I said, yo, my boy don't swear he nice, he knows he's nice. So Chuck was like, yo, put that story on the beginning of this tape, right now. Put it on the beginning of this tape. So then that's when I said, yo, Chuck, I was on my way up here to the studio, man, you know what I'm saying? This brother stopped me and asked me, yo, what's up with your brother Chucky D? He swear he nice. I said, yo, the brother don't swear he nice, he knows he's nice, you know what I'm saying? So Chuck, I got a feeling you turning into a public enemy, man. Now remember that line you was kicking to me on the way out to LA, Laurelton, Queens, when we was in the car on our way to the shop? But yo, right now, kick the bass for them brothers and let them know what goes on. Chuck D said, what goes on? Well,
thanks to heavy-hitting content of their 1987 debut album, Yo Bum Rush the Show, and their follow-up album, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, Public Enemy had already established themselves as elder statesmen in hip-hop's most defiant and radical era.
When I came out with, yeah, boy, everybody started sampling that shit. Everybody started sampling that shit. And also, when I said, rock that shit, homie, people started sampling that. Next thing you know, I became the most sampled voice right now to this day as we speak in the history of music.
So there you have it, in their own words. You've been watching Cultural Ambassadors Part 2 with Public Enemy. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.
We study the forms of music and DJ culture. People like Kool Herc, Africa Bambaataa, and the Grandmaster Flash. We know the music and its history. For those that don't think hip-hop is high art, this is Elements in Motion. Tonight, what we're being honored for is just not the longevity, but for skill at our craft and for the tenure earned as a group and also individuals within.
Especially want to thank everyone for honoring Public Enemy, and to our families definitely that made the sacrifice so that we can raise the conscious level of the human family. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and in the words of our good brother Steve Biko, revolution is not an event, it's a process. Peace.